You're listening to the Shared Security Podcast with Tom Eston and Scott Wright, exploring the trust you put in people, apps, and technology.
Brought to you by Scott Wright, the Streetwise Security Coach, and Tom Eston, penetration tester and ethical hacker. We bring you stories, advice, and tips to help you make better risk decisions because nobody else can make them for you.
Episode 43 for August 6th, 2015. A new look for the Shared Security website and Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the Shared Security Podcast with Tom Eston and Scott Wright. I'm Scott Wright, the Streetwise Security Coach up here in the Great White North, Ottawa, Canada. And Tom Eston, our resident security aficionado, I think is the official title, right?
That's right.
Joins me as usual from sunny Cleveland, Ohio, where it's, I think, 24 degrees, right?
24 degrees Celsius.
Celsius, exactly, yes. I had to look it up. What is that? 72, okay. Causes all kind of confusion here on the podcast. But if you're a little confused by the name of the podcast, the Shared Security Podcast, we're undergoing a transition, a long, slow, painful transition. Actually, not that bad. But actually, Tom's done a lot of great work to try and make it as smooth as possible. But we're changing from the old Social Media Security Podcast name, which served us well for many years, at least 41 episodes. Now we're changing things up a bit to cover more of the topics that are in the news, but it's not necessarily just because they're in the news or that's changing. It's because social media security, the podcast Social Media Security was heavily focused on what we all trust on the internet. And at the time, the biggest thing that we talked about was social media websites, for example. And what kinds of things we needed to watch out for as individuals and as businesses. But that whole concept now is expanding rapidly into mobile devices, cars, home climate control, fitness, airplanes, and the whole thing that we love to call the Internet of Things. So now, I think more than ever, we really need to talk about trust. Is that not right, Tom?
That is absolutely correct. And trust, I think, as you'll find, everybody that's listening to this podcast and the topics that we cover, trust is just more important than ever in terms of people and devices and the technology that we use. They're all interconnected now, and it's going to be kind of fun to explore the security and privacy ramifications of all this.
Exactly. And so, therefore, our name, the Shared Security Podcast, has a lot to do with trust. When we share things with people, we kind of trust that they're going to take care of them for us. And maybe that's a well-founded feeling or not. But we're going to explore all those things. So today we've got just a few topics, but they're all kind of around the area of the Internet of Things and some of these newer things that we're trusting. We're going to talk about hackable cars. We'll talk about maybe smartwatches and home climate control types of things. We'll also get into some of the other vulnerabilities and types of new concerns around the Internet of Things. So I think we'll just jump right in, Tom, and see what we can learn about hackable cars.
Yeah, that sounds good. So hopefully everybody has seen the news in the last couple of weeks about the Jeep Cherokee that was hacked by two security researchers. There's a lot of controversy around that particular hack because they actually did this on a real freeway while this researcher was driving the Jeep. So there was a lot of question of, wow, this guy could have been killed. He could have killed somebody else. There's a lot of danger in doing that, kind of it's kind of like the production environments, right? From an application security perspective.
Yeah, and I think it was, it was very important that they gave him good guidance, which was don't panic.
Right. Yeah, don't panic. So I definitely encourage everyone, if you haven't seen kind of the news reports, we'll have some links in the show notes if you want more detail on that hack. But kind of taking that a step further. So this week, here in the United States is the big security conferences of the year, which is Black Hat USA and the DEF CON hacking conference in Las Vegas. And so with this conference every year, of course, there's usually one or two topics that are kind of the center of attention in the security community. And of course, one of those things this year is, hackable cars, the Internet of Things, and what that really means, and how are security professionals going to address the issues, and also how are hackers, bad guys, right? Not necessarily the good guy hackers like myself and Scott, but the black hat hackers. What are they going to do to exploit this new technology, and kind of what's on the horizon? So us good guys, us white hats, can get ahead of that and hopefully defend these devices from them. So. There's a good article that we'll link in the show notes that was on Business Insider, just kind of talking about, the Jeep hack and what does that really mean? And, we've seen this over the years. Just last year, I believe, the same researchers, did some basic hacking in cars as well, and they got some media attention for that. But it's really evolved now because we've seen, this research really go to another level in terms of, now this is getting dangerous. If you remember the airplane hack, Scott, supposed where he was supposedly, going to make the airplane, fly sideways through the entertainment system on the airplane, which is, very skeptical at best. However, we're getting into an area now where now these hacks are becoming dangerous, right? Where people's lives are at stake because of these Internet of Things and how we've Internet enabled everything, and how there's just this massive now this car recall, for example. This is the first time that Chrysler and other companies now are recalling cars because of the research that these that they're doing now, that these security researchers are doing, and so it's becoming more of a safety issue. And I think that's just going to end up getting worse as the years go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the scary thing from my point of view is that the car companies, and they're probably not alone in this, that they really haven't thought things out in terms of security. And just the fact that, we can make this stuff work doesn't necessarily mean that we should, before we've thought of all the security considerations. And while I think of it, there was a good blog article by Dr. Anton Chuvakin, who's well known in our community, and he often talks about logging and detection of incidents and things. But he had a good blog post about why we should design tractors to be like tanks, which was just an analogy to say, you may not think of any particular device as being harmful, or it's not intended to be maliciously used. But these days, attackers will try to make use of any device they can in whatever mode they want to achieve their end. So they might look at something way differently than a normal consumer would, to say, well, my light bulb isn't going to attack anything. But it could be a stepping stone into an important computer network. So what his theory is you have to design everything as if it's going to be militarized at some point.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just there's just a lack of awareness, I think, from a business perspective of, customers want these, really cool features. They want, the latest smartwatches and all these things tied to the internet because, it makes people's lives easier. And there's an entertainment value to some of this as well. And it makes a lot of money. And every time we see that, there's just, let's put the security features and those types of risks on the back burner. Let's get them to market first, and let's make a ton of money.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's just businesses have to kind of take a step back and look at the ramifications of the technology and hopefully secure it first before it's being sold.
Especially when it comes to safety and certainly even with financial transactions that might be nearby, right? So they'll all be important.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, yeah, thanks. That's a great article. I mean, there's probably many articles now too on the Jeep hack. I think it was first mentioned in the Wired article. It was the journalist who was actually driving at the time when they hacked the car.
Yeah.
So that's a really good article and good video too. The other thing that I think people don't realize, and what I'd just like to try and reinforce, is that you sort of assume too much about what kind of security is already there, or to try and realize, or to try and imagine what kinds of risk mitigation people have already done, but they haven't really, because if you go back to 2 years ago when Charlie Miller and Chris, Chris Valasek were working on their original car hacking experiments with the Prius and the Ford Explorer, they discovered that they wanted to take over control of the steering wheel, and they discovered that they couldn't do that unless the car was going under 5 miles an hour and it was in reverse. And so people might think, well, yeah, you can't really do it if certain conditions aren't met. But the trick was they were actually able to convince the car's computer that it was going under 5 miles an hour and that it was going in reverse. And then they were able to take over the steering. So, like you said, the hackers get very innovative at trying to achieve their ends. And it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you think the security is there, that it actually is.
Right. Exactly.
Exciting. We're going to live in exciting times for the next little while.
It already is.
It's getting there, yeah. If you haven't noticed.
That's right.
So that brings us to another interesting article that we found. It was around the different types of Internet of Things devices and solutions, call them, that have, we're calling them smart devices, but they actually, some of them have kind of dumb aspects to them right now because the security hasn't been all that well thought out. And so this was an article from PC World, and they mention a few different categories, and I think it's good to sort of cover, the whole range and make sure people are aware. We're not just talking about cars now. We're talking, there are watches and fitness devices that they say don't have a lot of privacy policies, which may be true. It's until you have a look at it, you may not know what is happening with the information that is coming off your device. And it also reminds me of another article that I saw not too long ago about, should we even be trusting those devices with what information they've been gathering? And, we're concerned a little bit about the security of that information flying around, wirelessly. So, yeah, we should have some security. But as soon as you encrypt or lock up that information from site, you can't even monitor what the device is sending about you to its home base or its mothership. So those are other aspects of the privacy equation that we're going to have to think through a little more carefully too. So this is all coming coming out of a fire hose, right? All these weird things we have to think of now.
It's amazing. I have a good example too. We recently bought a new TV, a new smart TV for my house, and it's a Vizio TV, and has, of course, all the bells and whistles, and I can stream Netflix and Amazon on it. And I was just doing some research on the internet about the TV, and I noticed something very interesting about Vizio TVs. And they actually, by default, collect all the information that, every show that you watch, every time you turn on Netflix, all of that information they collect, and then they send back to Vizio's servers. And what I didn't realize was by buying the TV and then by connecting to the smart TV features, you basically agree to their privacy policy that says, and I looked up the privacy policy, and it says they will collect viewing information about what you're watching, when you're watching it, the date, the time, and it's being sent to them. And Samsung, I know, does very similar things as well. I had no idea when I bought this TV that all of those things are being sent to a company and possibly a third party. These are the types of things that we need to be aware of from a privacy perspective, and thinking about, will that change our purchasing habits?
Yeah, for sure.
But again, nobody reads those privacy policies. A lot of people just don't care. It's like, as long as I can get Netflix.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's insidious, right? Like, it's just people think, well, who cares if somebody collects information about what I watch? But when you extend it, over time, and the amount of information, the big data collection that's happening, when everything can be mapped together, and eventually you may not want that to happen when you see what else it's connected to. There was a good article I saw about, it was an article in. I think it was Forbes, talking about how there are social media sites that are, certainly obviously gathering information about you because that's how they make their money. But they're partnering with some of the credit agencies, and the credit agencies and the social media sites both have one piece of data in common that they can link everything together with, and that is your mobile phone number. So a lot of times the credit agencies collect that as part of their authentication to make sure they know who they're dealing with. But same thing with the websites and social media sites where they're using your mobile number, for a second factor authentication, for example. And think about linking all your social media site activity with your financial information that the credit bureaus have on you. And the reason that the social media sites want that is because it certainly helps them narrow down the demographics of who they're selling information about, how much your income is. It was scary, this Forbes article, how much they know about you. So when you think for a minute, I don't care who sees what I view. When you tie it all together, it can become really scary and spooky as to what people can know about you.
It really is. So, and that's what we've talked about this over the years of, taking the time to read these privacy policies and really understand what these companies are doing with your information. And unfortunately, it's only getting worse in terms of where your data goes, especially with this new technology. And Scott and I will be talking more, about watches and these wearables and all of those things that are just sending data really everywhere. And unfortunately, we just don't know where all that data is going.
Yeah, exactly. And one other thing from this original article, the PC World, had to do with, your home control. So controlling the locks on your house door. If you forgot to lock your door, I see billboards on my way, through town, forgot to lock your door, just use our security app and, we can do that. And it's, it sounds convenient, but think about all the applications of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to mention real quick, and we'll put this in the show notes too, my company Verico did a really interesting white paper on a couple devices that actually were, two of them were home automation systems looking at the security of those, Internet of Things type devices. One was a SmartThings hub, which is like it's a central control device for home automation sensors. So you can install these sensors, like your door locks, your refrigerator, all these different things, and it acts as like a hub to connect all those things. And then one to open up your garage through your Wi-Fi connection, which is interesting from a security perspective.
Yeah, no kidding.
A physical security perspective, if somebody can get into your garage, that might be an issue. But really,
it's going to happen. It.
It is, and it digs into the issues of just their basic security controls were not put in place for these types of systems. Especially when we're talking about home security and things that can potentially hurt or kill somebody. Just speaking of cars alone, but the home automation pieces are very interesting. Some of the ramifications of that.
And I think we're getting close to having covered all of our topics. I don't know. Did you have any more that you wanted to mention in terms of reports or whatever?
No, I think there's a link that we'll put in the show notes. It was a VentureBeat article. That kind of goes into more of the challenges in terms of securing the Internet of Things, which I think is a very good read that everyone should take a look at in terms of, okay, so you find a vulnerability, how are they patched, right? Because there's no, my smartwatch, for example, probably requires a firmware update, or there may be embedded devices that can't be updated.
Yeah, and I think there are probably many devices and products that are going to become smart in some way or other, but they're going to be designed to be limited use and short lifetime. So there's no point in their manufacturer putting an update model in place, but that doesn't mean that they won't be vulnerable over time. So you're going to have to plan on throwing stuff away if it can't be updated.
That's right. Yep. So yeah, we'll link that in the show notes, but in terms of Internet of Things, I think we've covered pretty much everything everybody needs to know for now.
So before we go too far, then I wanted to just sort of wrap up because I have a comment that I've been talking to people about in general with respect to this stuff. And when you talk to security professionals sometimes about these stories, some of them will downplay it and they'll say, it's all what we call FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I don't think that we're in that situation right now, are we?
I don't think so. Are we
overhyping the risks here?
Well, the airplane hack, right? I think that's some FUD involved in that, especially with flight entertainment systems are not connected to the cockpit controls. I mean, ask any pilot and they'll tell you that. So there's some FUD with some of the things that come out, but and some people are saying, "Oh, who cares if my Fitbit gets hacked?" Right? It's just my health data.
Yeah.
Well, depending on who you talk to,
Yes.
your health data may be very important to you.
Yeah.
So the FUD factor varies, I think, based on who you talk to. But the one thing that's not FUD is that the security ramifications of these devices, and especially, I think the car hack has really, the Jeep hack recently has really taken that to another level, because that's where people start seeing, well, it's not so much FUD anymore. I mean, somebody could have been killed.
It's safety, yeah.
And it's safety.
I think you're right. So I think that at this point, we don't have a problem of being wasting a lot of money on things, that we're securing too much of. I think we have the opposite problem right now. We're not keeping up from a security point of view with all of the threats and vulnerabilities that are appearing. So from my point of view, I don't think we're spreading FUD. I think you have to be able to articulate things in a way that people can understand and relate to. And so telling these kind of stories about things that people hopefully, haven't been victimized by yet, but can easily see themselves in that situation at some point.
Absolutely.
So I think, that wraps up our little rant on the Internet of Things and security. But I think we're going to be covering a lot more of these things, and hopefully it doesn't get to be a broken record and too much FUD. But I think as long as we can keep the stories interesting and relevant to people, I think we're going to have some interesting times on this podcast.
Well, there will be.
I just wanted to close off with one example. Even we security folks, aficionados, or whatever we want to call ourselves, we try our best to pay attention to things, but sometimes we can get tricked. And, there are many stories of security guys that have been hacked or social engineered. But I just wanted to share a story where I almost got hacked recently. And that was, I got a message that looked like it was from Facebook security. Very, very convincing from the point of view of the message content. Looked exactly like what you might see from a Facebook. And it said it was from Facebook security, and it said that my account had been suspended due to suspicious activity, or disabled due to suspicious activity. And it happened at the time that I was playing around with a few different Facebook accounts to try and, I think it might have actually part of a social engineering experiment that I was doing on the side. But nothing malicious, was all stuff that was under my own control. So it was plausible that they might have seen some suspicious activity between some of my accounts. And they said, it was disabled. Click here to go through the process of re-enabling it. And I came very close to clicking on the link. But the last thing I did before I would click on it was check to see who that message was sent to, what email address it was sent to. And it turns out it was not an email address that I have ever used for a Facebook account. And as I could also tell, Facebook was still working. I mean, on another browser tab, I could do things that I would normally be able to do on Facebook. So it really hadn't been disabled. But it was a really convincing message, and I just wanted to point out, that it is so easy to get caught by these things. But checking the message email address that any of these suspicious messages have in them. And the thing is, it's hard to stop yourself and think about these things, especially when it's an alarming kind of a message, that, oh my God, this is going to happen. You got to stop and take a moment and say, first of all, is this real? and check on a couple of things to make sure it's legitimate before you really panic.
Yeah, that's so true. And, to your point, Scott, I've been, duped several times as well. And, kind of as security professionals, we're trained to look for these types of things. And I mean, some of the phishing emails that I see are so realistic and so convincing that, luckily, I either had a heads up from somebody else that this was going around, or, I actually just stopped right before I clicked on something and said, wait a minute, should I really click? I don't know, and I looked in, the headers and did a little more research and found out, this really wasn't coming from Facebook or whoever the source was. But it just testament to, always being on guard. And any email that I receive, from Facebook or a service that I use, I definitely think twice before clicking those links.
Mm-hmm.
Just out of habit now.
Yep, good thing to do. So anyway, that was just a little bit of advice for people who might find themselves in that situation or actually get the same message. So I think that covers all of our story content. We did want to also mention that we have a new website, do we not?
Yes, we do. It's all, by the time this episode is posted, it should be live. So at sharedsecurity.net, you can check it out. And we'd love to have your feedback. There's a nice feedback form called Connect With Us at the bottom that you can fill out and send us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Everything else is the same. We'll still be posting our episodes there and the occasional blog. You can also check out our updated Facebook page as well as our Twitter account, where we're going to put news articles that are relevant to the podcast and what we talk about, as well as to get updates on when the next episodes are.
Yep. So just to be clear, the website is sharedsecurity.net, and our Twitter account is @sharedsec, SEC, and the Facebook page is what?
It's facebook.com/sharedsec, or you can just, in Facebook search at the top, just type in shared security, and it'll be one of the first links.
Absolutely. So that, I think, gives everybody good ways to reach us. And want to thank everybody for being patient. It's been a couple of months since our last episode, but we've been busy and also busy trying to get this new appearance launched. So it's... It's been fun, but hopefully I think we're going to have a good year coming up. And I want to thank everybody for listening. And any last words, Tom?
No, just want to thank everybody over the years for listening. We've been doing this since 2009, if you can believe it.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what was the date of our first one. I couldn't find it quickly, but I know we've done 42 episodes up to now. So yeah, it's a good record to have. We're not religious about keeping it every week or every month, but we're getting there.
Yep, it's getting better. So especially with these new set of topics, and I think this is just even more interesting than what we've been doing in the past. So we'll see where it goes.
Good stuff, and we'd love to hear from anybody who has ideas on stories or just stories themselves, tips, etc. So definitely. Contact us through the webpage or through Twitter. So we'll talk to you next time, hopefully within a month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.